In the name of God, our source. Amen. Please be seated. Whenever I hear the gospel lesson that we've read today, my mind instantly goes to two places. First, I'm reminded of one of the first baptisms I did when I was a new priest. A parishioner had a beautiful new baby and wanted her child to be baptized. I scheduled the baptism without first reading the lessons for the day. It turns out it was the beheading of John the Baptist. That was a mistake I would not make again. The other place my mind always turns whenever I hear this story is the story of Sunset Boulevard. Of course, it was a movie a long time ago, but my experience of the story is through the musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber. It tells the story of Norma Desmond, a once famous star of silent films whose career had been eclipsed with the advent of modern movies with sound. Her story is partly about her inability to and unwillingness to adapt to this new medium. But it's also somewhat about having been left behind, like so many other aging ingenues. She plans a return to cinema with a new silent film she's written. She would play the young girl who would woo Herod with her intoxicating dance. And once he's putty in her hands, she will demand the head of John the Baptist. In reality, the story of Norma Desmond is, above all, a story of identity. It's a story of her struggling and ultimately failing to understand who she is becoming as her circumstances change. The young writer who stumbles onto her estate eventually recognizes her and says, "You used to be big." And she responds, "I am big. It's the pictures that got small." In her delusional reality, she's perfectly fine exactly as she's always been. It's everyone else in the world that somehow is off track. The sort of brilliance of this story, whether intentional or not, I don't know, is that Norma struggles with understanding her reality. And as she does that, she turns to the story of the beheading of John the Baptist. A story which is, in its own way, a story of misunderstood reality and identity. When Herod hears of the remarkable life of Jesus, like a lot of people of the time, he struggles to make sense of it. He struggles to make it conform to his worldview. The most sense he can make of it is his memory of another great man, one whom he himself had killed. So we're told the story of John the Baptist and his beheading, not so much for its own pedagogical worth, but because it illustrates just how badly the great and the powerful King Herod misunderstood his reality, and how badly he misunderstood the reality that he was seeing right in front of him. Like Norma Desmond, Herod could only make sense of the world through his own experience. He couldn't imagine a world that grew beyond that experience. It's a challenge all of us face at one time or another. We cling to the experiences we've cataloged in our lives, and we construct an understanding of the world that coalesces around that catalog. What doesn't fit has to be made to fit. The problem is, none of us has enough experience for that to be truly reliable. We can't really grow until we're willing to admit that our catalog isn't complete. There is a bigger picture out there, bigger than we can imagine even. But too often we limit the big picture that we imagine by assuming our own view of it is all that there could be. Earlier this week, I was reading an interview with a retired astronaut, Ron Garan. And throughout the course of his career, he spent 178 days aboard the International Space Station. In that time, he traveled more than 71 million miles and orbited the Earth nearly 2,500 times. He says that stepping back from the Earth and seeing it literally from a bigger picture than any of us could possibly see it on the ground, he gained a new perspective, one that led him to realize that we'd all been fed what he called a huge lie. He said, "When I looked out the window of the International Space Station, I saw the paparazzi-like flashes of lightning storms. I saw dancing curtains of auroras that seemed so close it was as if we could reach out and touch them. And I saw the unbelievable thinness of our planet's atmosphere. In that moment, I was hit with the sobering realization that that paper-thin layer keeps every living thing on our planet alive. I saw an iridescent biosphere teeming with life. I didn't see the economy. But since our human-made systems treat everything, including the very life support systems of our planet, as the wholly owned subsidiary of the global economy, it's obvious from the vantage point of space that we're living a lie. We need to move from thinking economy, society, planet, to planet, society, economy. That's when we're going to continue our evolutionary process. There's this light bulb that pops up when I realized how interconnected and interdependent we all are. From the vantage point of space, he realized how interconnected and interdependent we all are. The world tells us again and again that our singular perspective is what matters most. What do I get out of it? What have you done for me lately? If it feels good, go with it. But that's a very, very narrow view. Just as Herod's worldview obscured the true identity of Jesus, just as Norma Desmond's experience obscured her own true and changing identity, individualism obscures us from seeing the truest measure of identity that we all share. Our interconnectedness is our truest identity. Our relationships, both with God and with each other, are our truest identity. I've said it 100 times, and I will say it probably 100 more. You can see God in a beautiful sunset when you're all alone, but you can only follow Christ in community. We need each other. And even though the world keeps telling us to be independent and to stand up for ourselves, that's a very, very narrow view. When we step back a little, we can see that there is something more. And it's not that our individual lives and stories and experiences don't matter. It's just that we have to see and appreciate that they're part of something bigger, something interconnected. Most of us have grown up hearing about Jesus, so it can be a little hard for us to wrap our minds around these questions that come up again and again about who Jesus is. But the truth is, even though we've heard about him most of our lives, we still have to seek those same answers that Herod and so many others of the time sought. We have to keep asking ourselves, who Jesus is in our own time and in our own experience. We have to keep asking who Jesus is for our own interconnected lives. The answer that comes up again and again is that Jesus is more than we can imagine. The answer that comes up again and again is that Jesus is best captured by understanding relationships. The answer that comes up again and again is that Jesus' relationships with both friends and strangers show us who he really was. And now our own relationships can help us to keep seeing who Christ still is. Our truest identity is wrapped up in each other's. And it's wrapped up in those ancestors before us. Our truest identity is not just our own. It's bigger than that. And our calling is to seek it and to embrace it. Amen.